Founders Day is a 2023 comedy slasher horror movie. Written and directed by Eric Bloomquist, it stars Naomi Grace, William Russ, and Emilia McCarthy. A small town is shaken by a series of ominous killings in the days leading up to a heated mayoral election.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a...
So for the most part, I go see movies alone. Very rarely do I go see them with anybody else, especially movies that I'm going to review. A lot of it is I just kind of am a lone wolf, but also too, it sways kind of how I review a movie. If I talk about it too much after seeing it, it's harder to then shoot a review. And it a lot of times will kind of lock me into one position or another if I discuss a movie too much with someone I go to see the movie with. But in this case, I went to see this with a good buddy of mine, my friend Josh, who does the music for my intro and is just a good friend of mine. And we were in a band together way back in the day, and we've just remained good friends since. He makes movies. He's just a super talented guy, but also a really fun person to go see movies with. Especially when it's one like this that's not very good. Because a lot of times if I go see a movie by myself that is not very good, it's very boring and it's hard to even stay awake. It's definitely hard to be entertained by it in a lot of cases. Like we went and saw The Mean One together and a bunch of other, B grade, not the greatest movies. But when you go to see a movie that's not the greatest like this with someone, it can be a lot of fun. And this is the case with this. It's funny because on the IMDb page, it lists this movie as a comedy, horror, mystery. And mystery, that's a little bit of a stretch, but okay, because it's kind of got a Scream thing going on where throughout the movie you're trying to figure out who it is. I mean, it's your normal slasher, so I guess you could put a little bit of mystery on it. But the comedy part, that's where I kind of scratch my head with this, because I don't think in any way this movie was meant to be a comedy. I think if anything, they're leaning into the fact that it's just so bad that it becomes funny, because the dialogue at times, I mean, there are some choices dialogue wise, so many scenes that literally had me and my friend just laughing out loud and straight up just making fun of this movie throughout its runtime. And I'm not trying to shit on this movie by any means. Like, it feels like people really tried here. They did the best with what they were working with. It's just not the greatest acting, but a lot of my issue really just is the dialogue, just the way it's written. The overall story is very repetitive, very much feels like any other basic bottom of the barrel slasher out there. It doesn't feel like it does anything original, anything new, anything different. And at the end of the year, I can almost guarantee this will be in my 10 worst of the year, because for one, I only talk about movies on my worst of the year that are in theaters, because I just don't think it's fair to dogpile and talk a lot of shit about really, really small movies that don't even get a theatrical run. But when it gets a theatrical run, I feel like that's fair game. That's putting yourself out there. That's putting enough money and resources out there that a quality film, a movie like No One Will Save You, could have really used a theatrical run, but instead just gets set over on Hulu and kind of wasted in some ways. But then you'll see movies like this that get theatrical runs. So for me, I think it's important to kind of let people know about movies that are in theaters, even if they're bad, and be honest and tell you why it's not a very good movie. But it's competently shot. There actually is pretty decent B-roll, the location, the setting, things like that. It doesn't feel horrible at all in those ways. It is shot competently. It's edited okay. I think the biggest issue this movie has is just it's not well written. The story just has so many holes. It doesn't make sense. And for a really basic bitch slasher, this movie is so hard to follow. I was just baffled on how complicated the story is, the structure of it, the way things wrap around and but not in a good way, in a way that you're like, it's really basic. It's really simple. There isn't anything complicated to this story. And yet the way you're telling it, the way the story is unfolding, the dialogue and the characters, it becomes this enigma, this complicated puzzle. And I'm like, come on, this is supposed to be a basic, simple slasher. So that's its biggest crime, really. Like I said, it's just the way it's written and the dialogue. It's interesting because the people involved in this come from TV series, and some pretty competently made TV series. So I'm not exactly sure what happened here. I think a lot of times trying to translate your skills from a TV series into a movie can be, a pretty big difference. And in this case, it definitely feels like they just didn't know how to make a horror movie, and a movie really for that matter in general, because none of these characters are believable. Their dialogue, their personalities, just not believable at all. And they're not fleshed out really at all either. There isn't much of any substance to the story, to the people involved. And another thing that really just made me so confused is, who is the main character in this? Every time you think you're following a certain individual, it goes and cuts away from them, and for a long time we'll go then focus on a totally different person, which makes it even harder to feel connected to any of these characters and root for any of these characters, because you're kind of like, is this going to be a final person or no? Okay, now that person's dead, so who's the final person involved in this at this point? And then even who the killer is, it's so convoluted, it's so silly. Every time you think you know who it is, they add some other weird, twist, but it's so bad, and it's really obvious what's coming. It's really obvious what they're doing, and there isn't a decent motive at all for any of the characters in this. It's just silly. And I don't know why really it's called Founders Day, because that is such a non-point in this movie. I don't get it at all. Like, for one, I don't remember any city I've ever lived in really celebrating a Founders Day. So I don't know why you would run with that in the first place. It's not really a holiday, and I don't know. But I mean, I guess maybe in some small towns they celebrate Founders Day. You'd have to let me know, but I've never lived in one where there is. So that's one. But for two, it's barely a talking point in this. It's barely a part of the movie other than the mask and the like gavel thing, which I don't understand why a gavel has to do with a mayor, but either way, the mask, I guess, is really the only Founders Day kind of thing in it. I felt like you could have just rocked with this as just this creative mask and this weird killer, and not even tied any Founders Day part into it, because it just doesn't really flush that out at all. It doesn't really have a point. I really don't, even after talking this over with my buddy, I don't really get the Founders Day angle. It's really baffling. There's a lot of choices in this that just feel like hodgepodge together. Like, you had this idea, you had this idea. Maybe there's multiple voices in this. Maybe it's a too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing. But from at least the IMDb page, Eric Bloomquist is pretty much the guy. He wrote this, directed it. I mean, there's a few other people that are credited with other stuff here and there, but maybe it's a studio interference thing, which is kind of hard to believe because this is a pretty small budget movie. I can't imagine a studio interfering too much on this, especially because Eric Bloomquist has wrote for, like I said, some pretty successful series. So it's not like he comes into this as this total green rookie, that's never really done any kind of project before. But it feels very much like a Scream ripoff, like they're just trying to capitalize on the success of the last two Scream movies. But it's not done in a good way at all. It just feels very rip-off heavy. Another good thing I will say, though, is the kills. They're actually pretty decent. There's some fairly creative kills, but then at the same time, there's some really bad CGI blood. The effects in general in this are just not very well done. So even that is a little bit like, yeah, but, But really, this is one of those movies, one of those rare movies that I do recommend on some level, especially if you go see this with a friend or wait till it's, VOD, get some beers and some buddies, because it is so bad it's good. And like I said, it listed as a comedy, even though I don't think that this was meant to be comedic really in any way. It feels like it's very much trying to take everything super serious. But just some of the choices, the things that are done, there are so many scenes that are so bad that they just make you laugh out loud. Things that just make no sense. I mean, this one scene early on, this dad is in this heated conversation with his daughter and she's like storming away, and then randomly he offers a cookie. There's no reason why. I don't know why he's got cookies. I don't know why he would say that, but there's so many line deliveries that are just so funny because they're so bad. It's also another one of these projects that I talk about a lot of times. When you got a limited budget, a smallish type of movie, why do you feel the need to cram so many actors into it? Like, if you had cut at least half of the actors out of this movie, you have a better chance, because then you have a few decent actors that are not maybe the greatest, but they're decent, and you focus more on them instead of having a ton of actors who the majority of really are green or just for whatever reason just are not believable in these roles, just cannot deliver in an emotional way or whatever. Like I said, though, a lot of it is dialogue problems with this and story problems with this, so it's not all on them. But either way, it's like you're spreading this over all these actors you can't afford, and so you just cram a whole bunch of cheap ones instead of just being like, all right, let's just focus on a couple key characters, you know, get the best actors you can for just a couple roles and focus on those. I swear, especially with low budget, less is more. I really wish more filmmakers out there would get that through their heads. I don't get it. I don't know. I don't understand. I understand when it's micro budget situations, because a lot of times you have a bigger cast, which means more people, you know, doing all these different roles. You might have a guy who's your, you know, your DP, who then also has a bit role, or someone who's, you know, running this light or doing this, you know, whatever. And so you throw them a small role. I understand in some cases like that, or people that donate some money, you give them a small role. I get it when it's micro budget crowdfunded stuff, but this isn't quite on that level. This is above that. This is a studio film. Like, it is an indie studio. It's, you know, it's very, you know, bottom of the barrel kind of thing, but it still is, you know, a somewhat studio film. But I don't want to shit all over this movie. It's just not that great, but it is fun. It gets silly at times. There's a lot of really questionable choices that just make it entertaining. So if you're someone that enjoys So Bad It's Good, movies that are not super serious in any way and are not really meant to be taken serious, I think you could definitely have fun with this. It's definitely not the worst slasher I've seen. It's just strange that this would be in a theater. This is something that if I stumbled across on Tubi, I wouldn't be like really that mad at it. I'd be like, oh, that's all right. That's not bad. But when it's in a theater, it's a head scratcher. It's like, why are you guys how did this end up getting a theatrical run? And it's not like huge nationwide release, but it's a pretty decent size. Like, it's over 500 theaters, I believe. So, I mean, it's a decent enough run that you could probably go see it right now in a theater near you. And that just kind of bugs me sometimes, because it's like, I would rather a movie like this not be on this platform, and a movie that really deserves it get that platform instead and get to be on screens instead. And then also that way I don't have to be so harsh on it, because it's like, well, it's just on Tubi or it's just on Prime. It's not like it's in theaters. It just seems like every year, especially in January and February, we see that there's always a couple of these movies that really have no business being in theaters. But I did have a great time with this. I really did. I had so much fun. I was laughing out loud, just joking around with my buddy throughout this whole movie. So on that level, I do recommend it. Just go in with the right expectations. Don't go spend a bunch of money and expect to get some scary, intense slasher, because it's definitely not.
He's dangerous!
But that's it for me today. Thank you so much for checking this out. If you enjoyed this, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and ding that little bell, because that is the best way to keep track of this channel. And when I post videos like this, and I post videos like this every single week, I also want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys absolutely mean the world to me. And if you would like to help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or if you want to help support this channel by becoming a channel member, there's a button right down there that says join. It's just a couple bucks a month, but every bit of it really helps me keep doing this. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun. And if you enjoyed this, click right here to watch me talk about the new thriller, the new space thriller, ISS. And I'll see you guys next time.